From beautiful downtown Sacramento, it's time for Beach Blanket Fort Bingo.
Beach Blanket Fort Bingo. Beach
Hey everybody, welcome to this special Halloween episode of Beach Blanket Fort Bingo. My name is Steve Schnee and I'm your host. Now, my co-host Ronnie Barnett is in the pumpkin patch awaiting the arrival of the great pumpkin, so he can't be with us this evening. So I have two special guests on this episode, Edward Douglas and Gavin Goszka, collectively known as Midnight Syndicate. For at least a quarter of a century, these two gents have been creating the most original and haunting music that you'll ever hear. Their soundtracks to imaginary films have enchanted fans for years and are now used in Halloween haunt attractions, mazes, all throughout the country. They've also composed and performed music for motion pictures, for role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, and they've even released a Christmas album. They have taken Midnight Syndicate to the stage in recent years, and they've been performing live. And now they have a brand new release called Bloodlines. And we'll talk about all of this and more. But before we continue, I believe that Midnight Syndicate is a very unique and mysterious musical project. So we've decided to maintain that mystery by hiding their true identities. So they are appearing here as avatars, but we will be featuring footage from some of their live shows, so you'll be able to catch a glimpse of them there. But now I'd like to introduce Edward and Gavin to you all. Welcome to the Blanket Fort, gentlemen.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
You've got a brand new release called Bloodlines, and you're in the midst of a busy live schedule leading up to Halloween. But before we talk about all of that, I'd like to briefly go back to the beginning. What inspired the formation of Midnight Syndicate?
We started off Midnight Syndicate with the idea that we would be a band that would create soundtracks to imaginary films. And these albums that would blend orchestral music and sound effects in such a way to really pull you into this world that we were trying to create. Maybe it's a haunted mansion or a dark carnival. Just really mix instrumental music and sound effects in such a way as to pull you in to a movie of your own creation. And I think our stuff has always tended to go towards the darker side because that is what inspires us most. The Mysteries of the Night, Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt comic books, all that stuff. And so the classic Universal monster movies. So that's why it tends to go that way. And then because our stuff has a very dark atmospheric vibe, it's become very popular at Halloween time with all the haunted houses, like you mentioned. And then also as atmosphere for, role-playing games or just anybody that's looking for good atmosphere to do something. And that's how we've been able to keep doing this over the years.
Well, what artist inspired the musical direction of Midnight Syndicate? Some may point to the darker side of maybe like a modern composer like Danny Elfman, but there are much older influences in your music.
Yeah, I think we pull from a variety of influences too. I mean, definitely some of the film composers like Danny Elfman, John Carpenter, certainly, but also, some of the heavy metal bands like King Diamond, Black Sabbath. Even some world music, like Dead Can Dance is kind of almost genreless. They do kind of their own thing. It's very atmospheric and such. So that's been a big influence too. But I think it's a lot of different things kind of coming together.
And I think as we've gone along, most of our initial influences were probably the movie soundtrack composers. But as you dig into it deeper, you realize just how much they were in. They are influenced by Bach, Wagner, Beethoven, Mozart. I mean, these are, you can hear how they influenced the soundtrack composers that influenced us. And so it all goes back to them.
How is each album written? I mean, like, let's just say, for example, I'm just going to pull up the 13th House because it has a connection to the new album. Now, do you both conjure up an idea, a vision, and then start piecing together musical ideas, or do you write some music and then sort of the full idea starts taking form from the music that you've written?
Yeah, we've basically always written to a theme. Like we'll kind of talk about it and decide on where we want to go with a story or a world or whatever setting, and then we'll start composing the music based on that. But we do actually, a lot of people are surprised to hear that we actually write independently, staying in contact the entire time though, is to make sure that we're completely on the same page and that all the bases are covered, and everything's kind of represented in whatever the world is that we're trying to create.
Yeah, it's just a constant back and forth. We'll write the music and then send the versions to each other for constant feedback as we to make sure that it all kind of gels together. But yeah, before we embark on an album, we decide, hey, this is what the theme of the album is. Let's talk about the characters. Let's talk about scenes that we're imagining in our head, and that all starts the whole process going of like songs start coming from there, and song ideas and stuff, and sounds. All of it just comes from these sessions that we have where we just talk about the world we're trying to create.
This world that you're trying to create, are you sometimes surprised, you'll have, maybe a set idea, I mean, movies usually come in 3 acts, first, second, third act. And do you have this idea of, a beginning and an end, but then when you talk to some of your fans that they see and hear it completely different than what you were creating?
Yeah, that's one of the coolest things, is to hear the different scenarios that the fans have kind of come up with. And we do that intentionally. We may have an idea of what a specific storyline might be, but we never write it so specifically that it's that obvious, like it's set in stone or anything. It's more kind of hinting at things like, okay, here's a room in like the 13th hour house, or here's a scenario involving vampires and stuff, but it's not like a linear kind of thing where, like a book would be plotted out or whatever. And I think that really allows the listener to kind of fill in the details and take it off in their own direction, which is awesome. I mean, that's one of the coolest things, that we get that feedback. And it's like, that's like, you get to do that, being a listener and stuff.
Now, when you write, do you approach each album from a different creative musical angle, or is there a sort of methodical process that you prefer to use in creating each album?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we probably approach the songwriting part a little bit differently. I tend to write everything. I can just kind of bang it out on piano, so kind of melody, chords, structure, that kind of thing, and then I'll fill in the arrangement later. But Ed tends to do a little bit more fleshing out earlier on in the process, which is kind of cool, because then I can hear a little bit more of where he's heading with some of the instrumentation. And sometimes it's kind of hard. I know it's hard for to hear through if you've just got a piano playing. Well, what does that translate to in terms of an orchestra? Is this the brass part? Is this the string part? So sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge.
And I think that for me, I dig into the theme that we've chosen, and I do as much research on it as possible if it's a historical thing, and then just immerse myself in imagery from like horror films, art, Gothic art, pictures, anything, and I just absorb that, and then I tend to compose in my head, and then so I have this all written down in my head, and then I just go to the keyboard and kind of put those primary elements together, and then so it is a little bit different. It's kind of coming from my head, and then step by step I put it onto the track, one layer at a time.
I mean, layers is very important to the Midnight Syndicate sound. On the surface, people can hear it and hear it as this big piece, but there is so much going on in the music there. And a lot of that is really atmosphere because there's spaces in between the sounds that add that haunting feeling.
Yeah, and we've been incorporating a lot with like sound effects, textures, of even if they're not straight out like sound effects that you think of like a door slamming or whatever. I think that's plays as big of a role as anything to fill in those spaces and to also kind of co-create the general effect that we're going for. You know, sometimes the atmosphere plays even a bigger role than the music does.
I was deeply inspired by the shadow radio dramas of the 30s, 40s, and then also when I grew up, I would get the vinyl records of Vincent Price telling stories for Halloween time, and I loved how they used. There wasn't much sound music, if anything, on there. It was all just the voice and sound effects, and I think it's where I grew this appreciation for how much a sound at the right time and place and can really pull you in.
Well, you see, the interesting thing, about the people who have not yet heard your music is you don't use the stereotypical Halloween sounds. There's something about the sounds you use which fit perfectly into feelings or mood that you're trying to create. But were you ever tempted or maybe encouraged by outside sources to add those scary witch sound effects? And
I don't think we were ever really that tempted because it's really all about the atmosphere. It's I think we look at it as being music first and atmosphere first rather than Halloween or, like horror first. So, the idea is just, it's supposed to be something that you could put on in a variety of situations, whether that's like at a home haunt, certainly, or just if you want to listen to it in the background while you're like writing or kind of chilling out or whatever.
We want people to be able to listen to these albums year round. That's really the goal. It's just that for the general public, a lot of them are in the mood to listen to this type of music during Halloween. So that's kind of where we've, that's where we get more action and like more excitement around the stuff during this time of year. But we really write it for year round use and hoping that people can at any point in time of the year pop it on and just kind of escape for a little while. Gavin and I are very lucky because we've been our own record label and distributor since the beginning, and so we've had complete creative control over everything that we've done. So I think that's allowed us to do, that we didn't really feel any pressure to do that. And also too, when we came out back in we're talking 98 was when we put our first like Halloween. We started marketing this Halloween album to Halloween stores. There was nothing like our albums out there because all of the existing albums at the time used those stereotypical Halloween sounds and sound effects, and so that is just another thing that made us different. And I think really was what probably drew the amusement parks and the professional haunted houses to us, because it just was a little, something different, if you know what I mean.
Again, for those who have not yet heard the music, for each album, do you create a certain melodic theme that sort of reappears throughout the album, albeit in like different shapes and different shades?
Surprisingly not. Now it's different for a movie score. We have scored a few movies, and that's an entirely different thing. So I'm not really discussing those scores. But for the Midnight Syndicate albums, yes, like Axe Giant, there will be themes that are brought up throughout there because it's part of the movie. It's serving the movie. But for the Midnight Syndicate albums, I don't think that we have many themes that ever recur throughout an album. Gavin, am I right on that? I think we could try actually to avoid that at all costs to keep it interesting and moving along, right?
Yeah, part of that comes from not thinking of the album as like a continuing story. I think that's probably more, maybe you'd be more inclined to do that if you had like a beginning, middle, end kind of thing where you'd wrap up at the end by bringing back like the intro theme or whatever. Yeah. But because it's really just more a collection of songs within that world or that atmosphere, I don't think we've ever, certainly not intentionally, ever wanted to go back to like a theme that we already set up earlier.
Obviously, you weren't creating these albums for the Halloween market. You went from writing these music for imaginary films And as Edward mentioned, to actually composing for independent horror films. Now, how did that end up happening? Was it something you went for, or did somebody come to you and say, "Hey, I've got a gig for you"?
They came to us. The production schedule for Midnight Syndicate has been we've been really busy throughout our career, which is we're very thankful for. And there's always been a real demand to put out Midnight Syndicate albums, but there's been a couple times where so we had to turn down quite a few offers, but there were certain times where it just lined up right, that we were approached by a filmmaker that we really appreciated or just liked the project, and it timed up well. And so that's how the three films that we've scored have all come about, and then The Dead Matter was actually a movie that we produced, so that's how that one came together. But
right.
For Rage and for Axe Giant, we were approached, and it timed up right, and so it's fun scoring for films, but it's just a completely different thing than writing for Midnight Syndicate. Albums, because I don't know, the film is it's not only the director's vision, but the film has to come first, and the music has to be secondary. It has to, everything you're writing has to support the film and what's going on the screen, and it's just a cog in the machinery. Whereas with the Midnight Syndicate album, the music's everything. There's nothing else. So it's just different, a different kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I like the creaky chair. It's like a haunted house.
I'm sorry, I gotta stop moving around there.
No, I love it. It adds atmosphere. Now, surprisingly, you've also written music for Dungeons and Dragons, which is more of a fantasy role-playing game, and also like a board game like Zombies. Do you have to approach that in a different way? Because there is no, there may be a beginning to a game, but there's no way to foretell where it's going to go. So you have to create an atmosphere for something that may go in a completely different direction than it did the last time they played.
Yeah, for the Dungeons album, we worked closely with Wizards of the Coast on that, and the main goal was to represent some of the classic dungeon situations. I mean, you're obviously, like you just said, you're not going to be able to represent everything. I mean, it's an infinite realm of potential, but some of the like battles had to be there. You want something to represent like going into a town with a tavern, and some of those iconic scenes and stuff. So that's kind of what we were aiming for on that.
Yeah, it just kind of like sits in the background and kind of just fills in, during an adventure. Now, the thing with Zombies that is a little interesting is that game does have, while the length changes, the game definitely has a beginning that then builds, and there is definitely an end. And so for that, and there's quiet moments, and there's like very intense moments in the game. So it was actually easy to compile a album that had a flow that started off like very light and slowly built to the very end with a massive finale that kind of mimics what happens at the end of every single Zombies game. So for that one particular soundtrack, we were able to kind of do something that very quite possibly could match up with the gameplay on many times when you play the game, which was a lot of fun to do. But that's just because that game lasts sometimes about 45 minutes to an hour, the length of the album. It kind of timed up. But for Dungeons and Dragons, just like Gavin said, those games can go anywhere. And so we were just trying to touch on the major themes from that world.
Right. everybody that knows me knows I'm a huge Christmas fan. And you recorded a Christmas album, which was a total surprise because as we spoke about before this interview, it is a hauntingly beautiful Christmas album. It's not Andy Williams or Dean Martin or Frank Sinatra, but it's really, there's a lot of atmosphere here. But oddly enough, there's a lot of warmth, which sometimes you don't expect that from something quote unquote Gothic or something quote unquote horror coming from that background. You expect cold, but this actually has a real warmth to it. Was it difficult to balance sort of the dark side and light side?
I wouldn't say it was difficult. We just definitely had to go into it with a different attitude instead of, because we definitely did not want it to be all go for the throat, dark, horror, I mean, it really, you don't want to lose or completely lose the character of the original songs for sure, but you definitely want to give it our own little spin. And I think it was just a matter of like deciding how far to go. There's some songs on there that definitely stray farther into the realm that we're more known for, the horror realm, but then there's some moments on there that are more on the kind of like the beautiful kind of just maybe darkly beautiful side. So yeah, I think it was more just going into it with the knowledge that this is not going to be go for the throat, just kind of keep a good balance going.
I'll tell you that album, it was the most rewarding album that I've done with Midnight Syndicate, and certainly maybe my favorite of all the things that we've done, certainly in the top one or two. I just loved it. I loved it. We could really do so much, and we could mix some of the hauntingness with some of the dark beauty. There's a track called Christmas at Midnight at the end of that album, which is like probably the most personal song that I've ever put out. And so that album's always going to be so special to me. And I'm just happy that people enjoy it, especially the people that enjoy Christmas music, because that was what we were intending. We were just trying to give our own spin to the classics we all love.
Right. Now, initially, for the first run of albums, Midnight Syndicate was a studio only project, correct? Yes.
It was, it's kind of funny because when we first started Midnight Syndicate, like way back when we were still kind of getting our feet, with where we were at with the whole concept of this soundtrack to imaginary film thing, we released the first album, the self-titled debut album was released. And then in order to promote that, I put together a multimedia show in downtown Cleveland, which blended film and live music and actors and like a real immersive experience. Well, I did that, and then after that, but that neither the first album nor that first show really took off. It wasn't until our next album, Born of the Night, that's when Gavin got involved and started writing along with me, that we really hit our stride and took off. But at that point, from Born of the Night straight on for the next 16 years, we were all studio. And I think mainly one of the big reasons is we felt like if we were going to produce a live show, we better have something really special, because it's just two people performing keyboards up on stage. Yeah. And so we figure that's not a very good representation of what we want people to take away from our shows. And so just figuring out how we could produce a show that an immersive show kind of held us back. And, I think, things started changing in the music industry. We realized we had to put together a live show. And so we started a Kickstarter, and we said, hey, we're going to raise money to put together a live show. And while we did that, Cedar Point, a park right in our neighborhood, who we've been working with since '98 with music, said, hey, would you like to produce this show and do it in our park? Do it in our theme park here. And we were like, oh yeah, absolutely. So they became our partner kind of in it. And what the funny thing is, it was, again, kind of like back in '98, this mixture of film and very immersive sound and a real, along with us performing on stage and stuff. So I'm sorry, that's a really long-winded response to your it's just funny how I always find it funny how things come around, 98, nothing happened with those live shows, but they kind of would later set the tone put us in a position to do it, right, 17, 18 years later.
decided to take Midnight Syndicate to the stage and perform live. Has that become more time consuming than writing and recording?
Ooh, I'd probably say it's about equal. They just use different resources and skills and everything.
Hmm.
But we'll spend, we'll probably spend 6 to 8 months writing and recording an album from start to finish, between deciding on the concept and then getting the
Hmm.
rough ideas and all the way through to mastering. But putting the live show together, it's kind of the same process, just with different elements, deciding on, again, a theme, a story. The shows are definitely a lot more story oriented. There is definitely like a through line that plays out from start to finish. And then, of course, pulling all the elements together if we have to do any filming, if we have to, have any props or anything made or anything like that. So they both take a while. Yeah.
You mentioned that the shows are at Cedar Point. Now, is Cedar Point, we here in California on the West Coast, we don't have Cedar Point. Is Cedar Point similar to like Six Flags?
It absolutely is. So Cedar Point is like the flagship park for Cedar Fair parks, and Cedar Fair owns like King's Dominion out there on the East Coast, a lot of the Paramount parks they bought, and Knott's Berry Farm, which is one of the
Wow.
first amusement parks in the world to have a haunted Halloween theme.
Yeah. Yep.
So they're groundbreaking amusement park down there. But yes, the cool thing for us is that we've also had the pleasure of working with all the Six Flag parks over our
Wow.
career. They'll take our music and they'll play it in the midways as you walk through any of the
Fantastic.
you'll hear, you'll be like, you listen and you might hear some haunting themes in the background. That's a lot of times it's our music, and that's been a thrill for us too, because Six Flags another great institute right there. And so you take yes, to answer your question, is very much like Six Flags. I think Cedar Point got its notoriety for really being strong with the roller coasters.
Okay.
A lot of that's their claim to fame. However, they also, it's a huge park, and they do a really great Halloween event, which is also rivals Knott's Berry Farms, and just really an expansive nature and really, really cool, a historical place up here in this, been around for like 150 years.
Wow.
They celebrated their 150th anniversary. So there's just a great sense of history when you walk into the park, and that's kind of cool.
In your live show, you play your quote unquote roles. Taking the music on stage, do you enjoy that connection, the reaction from the audience during the performances? And is it a whole different experience creating that music on stage when there are people there?
One of the most rewarding things is seeing the reactions and hearing the reactions to the show as a whole, because the audience is there. There's so many different elements. I mean, there's, of course, we're up playing the music and everything, but there's live actors, there's film, there's other things which I won't get into spoilers about, but it's like a whole experience. So I don't know. I mean, you could probably watch our show multiple times, and people have come back to do just this and see different elements. They'll watch us playing one time, they'll watch the films another time. It's like a different experience every time. So I don't know that when somebody comes in and sees the show once that they're necessarily focusing just on us playing, because there's so much else going on. But that being said, they're reacting to the entire experience. That's been pretty wild. We actually, this year, we're rebooting a show that we did in 2018. It was probably our most popular. It's definitely our darkest show. And we upgraded some things and made some additions and such. But the audiences, when we ran this the first time, the surprise factor was like there.
Yeah.
They would go nuts for a lot of the shows. I mean, it was like, like we had to kind of not stop the show, but like kind of wait the audience out, because they were just like screaming and like whatever. It was pretty cool.
That is definitely rewarding to hear that the response, and we try and do a meet and greet after every show. And how great is that to be able to meet people who may have been following your music for many years, you know, or just happened to catch the show, happened to watch by and say, this seems interesting, I'm gonna check it out, and enjoyed it. So that, yeah, the feedback we get afterwards and you know, at the end of the show, yeah, it's definitely a thrill, a totally different thrill for us.
Yeah, I've been a fan for many, many years, as you guys know. And this is the first time I think that we're actually meeting face to Avatar.
It is.
Now that Midnight Syndicate is a live entity, does that change the way that you compose the music?
I don't think it does for me at all, because we'll adapt the live arrangements kind of as needed. You know, I think when we go into the studio, I'm looking at writing the same way that I always do. I'm not going to like say limit what I'm thinking just based on the fact that, oh, we may play this song at, you know, at a live show at some point. It's just like, what are you hearing? What do you want to see in it and stuff? And that kind of takes the precedence, you know, and then later on, if we play it live, then okay, we'll adapt it, you know.
Right.
I mean, it was kind of cool. We just got a chance to do that, like with Bloodlines. That was our first studio release in four years, and yeah, it felt just like it always did. Writing for this album was fun, and there was a great energy to it. We loved the theme of haunted mansions and stuff like that. So ghostly specters and stuff like that's in our ballpark. And we just had a great time, and it didn't feel like anything different from the other Midnight Syndicate album. Nothing had changed as far as like the style, the approach to writing, which was nice. You know, it was just cool, and I like you know what we came up with on this one.
Yeah, now that you brought up Bloodlines, let's talk about the new album. What can you tell us about it? This is actually a prequel of sorts, isn't it?
It is. It's a prequel to the 13th Hour. We knew we wouldn't be able, with everything happening this year, we wouldn't be able to do like a full-length album, but we wanted to get some new material out. And the idea came up of doing just that, like a prequel, something that was linked to an existing album. And the 13th Hour was a very obvious choice. It's, you know, it's one of our most popular albums and certainly one of our favorite ones. So yeah, the story kind of basically picks up before the events of the 13th Hour. And the cool thing is it tails seamlessly, or we designed it to tail seamlessly into the 13th Hour's first track. So if you play them back to back, it should be a continuous listening experience.
Kind of giving some more potential, some background to the characters that we meet in the 13th Hour. Like, how did things get this way? Again, it's very ambiguous. I think everybody that listens to that album is going to have a different impression of exactly what's happening, which is what we want. We want everybody to always be able to make their own decision on what's happening. But a very cool, should give a lot more sparks for people's imaginations and before they, you know, when they listen to it, you know, and imagine some more of these characters or what's going on. So yeah.
Do you kind of like the fact that, you know, you're putting out this new album as the prequel, and it's only going to regenerate people's interest in going back and listening to the 13th Hour again? Which
it is really cool. And you know, maybe they'll find having Bloodlines as like a prequel, maybe they'll hear something differently or imagine something differently going back and listening to 13th Hour now, you know.
See, I think that's the thing about Midnight Syndicate Records with me, is the way you interpret an album is kind of the mood of the listener. So if somebody is feeling joyful and elated, they may imagine or hear a different story than if they were sort of you know, disgruntled or angry or down. And it's your mood sometimes that dictates the way that an album feels. It's your mood that sort of pulls out that atmosphere and twists it around. So you could listen to the same album over and over again, and each time it might be a different experience.
Absolutely. And even what resonates with you, you know, like maybe a certain character or a certain scene or, you know, a type of event may strike a chord with you, maybe from your personal, you know, experience and such. And that'll kind of, sway your experience too in a certain direction.
Beyond this Halloween season, with your live show and stuff, do you have more ideas in the pipeline for future projects?
This has been definitely, without question, our busiest year from start to finish, which is fine because we're making up for last year, of course, being what it was. So I think the first order of business is to take a little bit of a breather. But yeah, I mean, there's, we'll definitely be continuing things down the road and whatever. We'll probably be kicking some ideas around sooner than later,
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
I mean, you got live shows that this year's show has been going really wonderful, and the response to Bloodlines was fantastic. We really have loved that too. So we have so many more places that we want to yet take people to, and so many more themes that we want to explore and everything. It's exciting, for us as we go through this. It's exciting to think of where we can go. I can't give away too much, but we've actually been in talks with something, probably in someplace in your neck of the woods.
Awesome.
There, we might be,
yeah.
We'll have the chance to do something with. How vague is that? I don't even know what. But it's just funny because you're out in Sacramento, so it's like, yeah. So I mean, like, we are constantly looking for, not only different people might approach us, the different opportunities. You never know what's going to happen from year to year. This past year, we did a soundtrack for Halloween Horror Nights, where they've been using our music since '99, and we rewrote some music for the event, the Universal Orlando event, a couple years ago. And let's put together an album of the music that we've used in the theme park, most over the past 20 some years. And let's put it onto an album. And so, before you knew it, we were doing this Music of Halloween Horror Nights album that we just we put out. They did a limited edition thing out at Universal Orlando. We went out for a signing last week, and just kind of fun. But that's the kind of exciting little things that extra projects and stuff like that we might undertake. That just you never know when those are going to happen, but a lot of fun.
Now, for viewers who have never heard them, I know that you may want to try something like this. Halloween music is a compilation.
Yes, it is.
And so is Out of the Darkness, but they have just a rich, deep catalog of some amazing atmospheric. I don't really like to use the word gothic. I know the word gothic is thrown around, but in a sense, you can call it gothic, but I think it's much more imaginative than that. It's much more creative than being lumped into just one category. But where can viewers stay updated on all things Midnight Syndicate?
MidnightSyndicate.com is a great gateway if you have any interest in the music or what we do. From that website, you can go to our social media pages. You can go to places like Spotify or our YouTube pages and listen to music. You can watch videos on YouTube, but you can get to all of it through MidnightSyndicate.com. And then certainly, and if we have any news on what we're doing, it's right there on the front page. There's a little about section if you want to find out a little bit more about our history and stuff. A store if you'd like to purchase physical media like CDs or vinyl records. We have them there on our website. So I direct people there because they can decide whatever they're kind of interested in and go from there.
Anyway, that's it for this episode of Beach Blanket Fort Bingo. I'd like to thank Gavin Goszka and Edward Douglas from Midnight Syndicate for joining me for this special Halloween episode. They're the only guys that I would ever consider to be on a Halloween episode of Beach Blanket Fort Bingo. Remember to check out their brand new release, Bloodlines, and their catalog. It's amazing. It's atmospheric. And like they said earlier, you can listen to it all year round, but it's perfect for Halloween too. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see y'all next time on Beach Blanket Fort Bingo. Goodbye, everybody.